Ready for the Chief Financial Officer's report?
Sure. Okay, good evening. Tonight I'd like to highlight the October 2018 financials. This is 4 months of our budget, 33% of the fiscal year. If we look at board book page 42 and look at the monthly summary for October, you'll see that our revenue for the month for all funds was roughly $500,000. Once again, our major revenue sources are real estate taxes and our evidence-based funding that we are receiving from the state. Our expenditures for the month were roughly $1.96 million. And in this expenditure side, our salary and benefits account for the majority of it. And I always like to highlight what our out-of-district tuition is for our special education students, which is $82,000 for the month. If we move to board book page 43 and look at the financial statements, the first page that you see is our fund balance. The main thing to focus in on that is our operating fund balance at the end of October is $17 million. Just a reminder that $3 million is restricted on it, so that drops it down to roughly $14 million. If we flip to the revenue side on page 44 in board book, you'll see that our operating revenue for the first 4 months is at 43%. That's pretty much where I expected it to be at this particular time with what our property tax collection is and what our revenue is from the state. On the expenditure side, on board book page 45, our operating expenditure for the first 4 months is at approximately 37% of budget. That is tracking pretty much right in line with as the previous couple of years' budgets for expenditures are. I do not see any issues currently with where we're tracking. As we move on to the revenue expense report, there were some questions submitted on the revenue expense report. The first question was on board book page 41 under account number 101720, which is student fees. This is actually money for band uniforms. $8,189 was deposited into the wrong account. It should have been under 104720. So there was a typo in the general ledger account. Instead of being 4720, it went in as 1720. A journal adjustment has already been done. The 4720 is career and technical education dollars that we receive from the state for Perkins. On board book page 54, under account number 10, 1400, 4100, 4608, and right underneath it is 617. These are both career and technical education accounts. What happened here is,
Scott, are you on? Give me 1 second.
He's using the old numbers.
Yeah,
Go to
because
page
Mary Ann,
14.
you added
On
the
the
JV tour.
He's on
thing.
expenditures, page 14, if you look at the top.
okay,
So
then, all right, so I'm off, I'm sorry. I didn't know that there was an addition to it.
this is 59, page 59.
Page 59. But, okay, so it's both under the same function code of 1400 under the supply lines for Perkins and CTEI. On this one here, what happened is both grants were amended after our district budget was adopted. So what happens on this is if the reviewers from ISB don't allow some type of budget item that was put into the grant, we have to shift it to a different account. And the easiest account to be able to expend the money is to put it into supplies for our career and technical education programs. I just want to let everyone know that...
I don't understand your explanation. Try that again. So we put in, what did we put in for?
So I'll give an example. If we put to put exhaust fans into our foods lab,
Okay.
and that item was not allowable per the state.
Under
Rules and regulations under Perkins
Okay.
for it. So what we had to do is take the money that was allocated for that capital item, which was a fan, or multiple fans to put into it. we had to redistribute the money out to other accounts, which happens to be the supply account. So what happened was that item didn't work, and at the time that the budget was adopted, we had capital items in there, but unfortunately, the reviewer didn't allow it, so then we had to put an amendment in on our grant and shift it from capital and move it to supplies for those particular programs.
Okay.
Both these grants are reimbursable grants, so we have to spend the money and then put in for reimbursement. The biggest issue that you can get with any grant is not spending your grant money, and then that means then you would lose it and you wouldn't be able to put in for reimbursement.
Okay.
So we'll be able to recoup these funds?
We will recoup them.
Okay.
In the budget, Perkins Grant has $35,000 and CTEI has $33,000. So that's what we're working with within our budget.
Got it.
What's
Thank
the
you.
next one, Scott?
I'm going to go with board book page 58.
What's the top right corner of your,
It might be 59.
Oh, 59, am I off
You
again?
might be adding 5 pages.
5 pages, so I'm 59. Under function, it would be account number 10-2220, 7410, which is non-cap for audiovisual equipment. The budget items
hold
at
on,
the
Scott,
beginning.
you're on 62
62?
of the board book,
All right.
17 of your sheet. So when you see out in the top right corner of your sheet, it has the page 17.
Okay. Yeah, I'm
Can
sorry.
you read that when you go to that, so that we're not trying to add or catch up? 'Cause I think
Okay. So,
Kristen added something late, Scott. It's not your
It's my
fault.
fault.
It's Kristen's fault.
it's all right. All right, under, where are we?
You're on the last line on page.
62. Yes, non-cap equipment. So the original budget items that were placed into the budget and approved beginning of the year, the items that were selected were over $1,000. When they did the pricing now, they came in under the $1,000, which therefore we couldn't capitalize them, and we had to put them under non-cap. So
Got it.
what'll happen here is the non-cap will go over budget, and the capital account will be under budget.
Okay.
Okay, that was all the questions submitted on the revenue expense report. The following report after the revenue expense report is our student activity accounts.
No questions were submitted on that?
No questions were submitted on that. And then the last report that was entered into my CFO report is the quarterly business review from Aramark. This is a very good report from Aramark showing what they do on a day-to-day basis, what items they've tackled as far as life safety, different capital projects that they're doing, and then kind of giving a timeline as to what are some of the next things that they'll be focusing on.
No questions were submitted?
No questions
Okay.
were submitted.
Anything else?
That is it for the chief financials report.
Okay. Next, we have discussion.
Thank you. I'm sorry, discussion items, FOIA requests.
Mary Ann, our FOIA's back towards the beginning. Because in board book, after Scott's report, it goes to staff enrollment and
I
projections.
think they were closer to the front.
Or is that under, all right, Scott, you have to do, that's under your report, correct? Staff enrollment?
Yeah, that's a separate one.
Okay, but it's under you, right?
Yep.
Chief, okay, so, just to update the board, why Scott finds his page, and actually it's a little bit of Kristen, a little bit of Scott, a little bit of myself. Something I started, it was 8 years ago when I became the superintendent. The school district had always done enrollment projections from the feeder schools. So we took that a step further, and when the board was working out its financial issues, trying to identify projected staffing needed and an average class size needed, so the board would have an idea when we had to cut staff, or now over the last few years we've added back staff to try to commit to a 25-to-1 class size. So the first chart that's provided is information from Kristen, and the classes under 20 with board approval, these are the courses that align with the board policy that anything under 20 needed board approval, And so as you see, we only ran 3 courses. Pre-algebra, which is one of our requirement courses, Intro to Heritage Speakers, which is a required course under our ELO government program, our government funding program, and then German 3, AP German, which is a capstone level course in our German program. So we had several other courses that were, that did not have 20 students and did not run or were not brought to the board. Kristen, I think you had some other information. Do you want to touch anything or answer any questions with your report in regards to the other class information you're providing?
Sure. So the next chart includes classes that were over 20 at the time when we sectioned in March, and we provided an update on where they are in October. Some of the classes that dropped below 20 were due because there was a conflict between that course and a core course that the student was required to take. We try to eliminate those as much as possible. But a lot of, like for advanced autos, for example, almost every single student conflicted out with one of the required courses. And so that's why you see the discrepancy. And then on the second page, there was a question on the second chart.
I figured it out after I asked it.
Okay.
It was short for Shakespeare, right?
Yes, correct.
I thought you were teaching a class on shake making. I was a little worried. Or it's going to come back to high school.
Mary Ann, can you go to the next chart?
Can you answer one question, Kristen? We
Sure.
ask this all the time, and you do. So a class like advanced autos, where there's some of the kids in that type of program, they're taking more of the hands-on, however we describe them, classes. Is there periods during the day when there's no core course, and so it's easy? I mean, I know you go through a very complicated matrix of how to make this happen, but there's just probably no way to avoid certain conflicts between core courses and even some of the significant courses for people who, like this, want to be in more of the technical classes, right?
Correct. And those core courses were courses that were also only offered one period a day. So it wasn't like they were all offered multiple periods and we could
Okay.
just push that student into a different period. And we do try to avoid it as much as we can. One of the challenges with advanced autos is that, and some of the elective classes, is especially if they're open to all 4 grade levels, it's hard to avoid conflicts at all 4 grade levels.
Sure.
So that's where sometimes you can see a little bit of a drop. But we use that information as we try to schedule courses the following year.
Sure.
To avoid some of those conflicts that came up the previous year. The next page in board book, which I believe is page 99, is just a summary of FTE per department and then actual class averages. So we pulled this information as of October 31st to look at the number of students within each course to compute the overall class averages. So as you can see, overall class average is 26.9. And if you look at the overall class average without our 40-to-1 classes, which is typically some of our music classes as well as our PE classes, that class average is 25.38. And then core classes, math, English, science, and social studies, has a class average of 24.66. And if you look at the historical averages, you can see that they have decreased over the years.
I didn't ask it on purpose till we got here, but if somebody took a close look at the report card, it's got a class average number 2, and the state average is like 20, and ours is like a little bit higher, I think, than what it is. And would you explain again why the
Sure.
state's number is significantly different than what? I mean, there's no way that the average high school class size in the state is 20 students.
So the school report card calculates the class average by only pulling data from your second period and your 5th period.
Okay.
And then they use that information. I believe they exclude PE and study halls, if I'm remembering correctly, and then they use that information to calculate the overall class average for the entire school. So it's very different, whereas we look at every single class to calculate the class average.
Do you think in 2018 you could just use whatever data is available instead of picking 2 of them out, right? Oh, well.
So,
Just a good summary for the board, which shows the historical average. Last year, we had some unassigned FTE. This year, you can see we only have a 0.1 unassigned, but we have a total FTE of about 104.6. Next page is the feeders.
Before you move on to, you had a plan to get to the 25 over a period of time,
We've
finished
accomplished
that
that.
plan, right? So this is
Correct.
more in line with our expectation would be on a going forward basis then.
Right, so the next part would be enrollment projections, and then when we get to the staffing part, I'll explain that, but let Scott touch on the enrollment projections. Because now it's met, how, you know, what it will cost to maintain it, or how many
Sure.
staff will need to continue to maintain that 25-to-1 average.
Okay, on the enrollment projections, using the feeder school information that we receive, incoming classes will be 90% of what our feeder enrollment would be for 8th grade. And then for each grade level moving forward, we add 1% to take into account for transfers. Transition students are included in the projection now to try to get a better handle on what our total amounts are. With it, there were some questions as to why the actual and the projected have gone up. As the transition program has grown, there has been additional students that stay on the books as transition, increasing our total for the actual.
So let's take, I think it might be easier explained if you looked at the chart on board book page 101. In FY19, or FY18, you know, let's go FY19 projection for the junior classes at 385, and then you see when you get to
See the
FY19 actual, it goes all the way to 430. Scott has mentioned in his bullet notes on the bottom about transition students. So remember, special ed students that receive a diploma or receive a certificate of participation have a right to stay enrolled till their 22nd birthday. So we have to account for those students, and our transition program has grown. So that's why you see a projection. That's why the senior
The
class number is inflated. And if you look at some of the projections going forward, it's inflated as well to account because we're starting to able to project how many 5th, 6th, you know, students will be staying for 5, 6, 7 years.
Maybe you put a footnote on seniors and say seniors and.
Third footnote, I think transition students are included in the senior year actual.
Actual
enrollment.
I didn't miss that.
And then with the projection for next year is based off of what I received from our Director of Special Ed with our current transition students, and then a projection as to what they feel the current seniors, once they get their diploma, if they're going to be in the actual program, to get the total. So that's reflected in our projection for 2020, which gives the higher increase from junior year going to our senior year. And then moving forward in the
Are we able
projection.
to project the in-house for like 2020?
Yes.
We could give it's a rough estimate.
I know,
But
but
it would be,
We took out that, we did it on the next page.
Oh, you did, okay. I thought I saw it somewhere.
yeah, it's on the next page with what we were thinking it would be. But then from 2021 through 2026, we took a 5-year kind of history on what we project out to be transition students using 18 transition students, and carried that then through for the senior years, for the senior year data.
So depending on the mobility rate of people moving in the district and out of the district, if you look at 2016's attendance, and then you look at 2025, 2026, you know, the attendance projections as of right now would show that we'd go down almost 100 students.
Right. I
But we will
noticed
have a
that.
peak in
Next
20 and 21. And we start to slowly shift back down. So the final worksheet, and this helped, as I mentioned, and I think Tim brought up a good point, this worksheet's helped the board, and it's become customary now in November, where we project based on the business office's enrollment projections. We then project staffing. And so, as mentioned before, our current average is 26.9, And as you can see, that comes out to a total roughly of 104.3, the top right corner of the green box. We currently have 104.6, and if the board remembers, we did order staff an additional social worker, a part-time social worker, which is accounted for in the chart on the left. So looking at the 1709 projection and removing approximately 2.5% for both homeschooled, outplaced, and transition students, our in-house should be roughly 1666.
Okay.
If we use the 1666 and an average of 27 students in all classes, we should be staffed at approximately 106.6. And an easy way for the board to understand this, I know we've gone through this now a couple times, even the new board members, this is their second year seeing this. Basically, every 25 students accounts for one full-time FTE. So if we have an increase in roughly 50 students, which is 1611 to 1666, that's why we're going up roughly 2 FTE if we keep the 27 average. If there are concerns about staffing, we could go to 27.5, and that would be an increase of about 0.6 FTE. Now, we have 2 retirees scheduled to retire at the end of this year, and so we would basically be replacing them and then adding 2 more teachers. So some of the cost savings, basically the cost savings from the 2 retirees would go to hiring those 2 additional teachers and basically eat that up. Now,
That goes your master plan.
well, I think if you take a second and trying to disclose, be fully transparent, if you look at the years 21, 22, 23, as enrollment begins to drop, and we have retirees over the next 5 years, we should be able to also not only, not have to replace some of those retiring teachers.
So you're saying that, so we're gonna, based on these numbers, we're gonna be 106 this next year, but then we're going up.
106.
Enrollment's gonna go up the year after
It's almost
that.
the same the year after.
Year after that, it's the same, so I wouldn't see
Identical.
much of an increase. Then
Be
if
the
you start
same.
looking below that, you start
Then it
dropping.
starts coming back down.
Correct.
Then as people retire, you just don't have to replace them because.
So that's where the
enrollment's
district
going
would recoup its savings from the retirements.
So in this year, 24 and 25.
Yeah, I think at 22 and 23, if you go down to 1680, so that right there, that's at least almost a 1.2, 1.4 decrease.
Yeah, but there's still more than we are this year.
Correct, but remember now, that doesn't take into account outplaced in transition, that's total. So I would assume that if you take the 2% out of that, it'd be lower than what we are this year, so we could possibly reduce by 1 teacher. So when I looked at Scott's retirement list of teachers that have put in retirement for the next 5 years, and you look at the attendance projections, the first 2 retirees that happened this year, the cost savings are eaten up by, well, there's really no change because the
It's a net.
savings, it's moved.
So here's the thought, do we have a number of special education in the feeder schools? Where's that number going?
All in there.
They look at
So
that.
we get everything, we get
But-
outplaced.
Well, it's in there, but is it, if we get a disproportionate number, if we get more special ed, we need to hire, is that,
If you get a higher
Special ed.
transfer in rate, you mean, you could.
right,
We also get special ed kids transferring too.
right. Because that's kinda hard to put in that 106 if you need,
Right.
if
Right.
by law, we need to hire another
I mean, you
special ed
could,
teacher.
every year when Kristen gives us the numbers and says what her tentative class schedule is, she said it could change depending on the number of special ed kids we get and the number of transfers we get.
Wes, if you look at the sheet I gave you and just, it's easy to, going forward in the future, we could sit there and do the 5 years where you just take 2.5% from like the 1682 to 1688. That'll give you an in-house number, and you can drop those numbers in my Excel sheet, and it would tell you what our FTE would be. And that's what we do in our enrollment, or our financial projections. So I think where the district, remember we talked about being able to sustain a 5-year financial projection at running a small deficit. I think where we end up recouping some savings is with the enrollments coming down in FY '22 through '25, and at the same time having, almost 2 teachers a year retiring. And so what would be ideal in those situations is if that enrollment does align with the projections, you would not have to replace the retiring teacher. It's for full savings.
So the elementary school on the Brookfield side, both Gross and Brook Park, put significant additions on, but we don't think, I think we've held pretty constant. I remember seeing the numbers 1680 about 7 years ago.
The biggest thing that's
So-
impacted us is we've had a growth in our transition program.
Okay.
So that's what makes that number look high. If you look at the projection for fiscal year '20, we're at 1709, but really 1666 is what we're projecting inside. So yeah, it's an increase of 50 students. So you're starting to see some of that growth from the Hauser had a huge junior high class over the last few years.
Right.
I think another idea, something that you could just kind of watch, is if you go back to board book page 100, this is the information that's filled out by each feeder school.
Okay.
So you can see that there are some large numbers under District 95 in grade 2, or grade 1, 2, and then again in grade 5. And so what will impact us is as we get this information every year, if there's significant changes in their transfer in, transfer out rate, right? If a lot of young families are moving into the district, these numbers can obviously increase.
Yeah, because Gross has an addition and Brook Park has an addition. They've
Well, look at
kind of
their
had a little-
numbers, though.
Yeah.
Their numbers look like,
Does
well,
the
didn't they
District
just?
94 numbers take into account that bump that Kamara got from that housing development that was built?
I don't think they have any students enrolled at this time.
Okay.
But
'Cause
none
they're
of those
projecting
students, none of those students will attend RB.
Oh, they won't?
They will not.
Oh,
They go to a
okay.
proviso high school district.
Oh, all right.
So why are you seeing this in November, not closer to March when it's budget time? The idea of laying this out to you,
You're prepping us.
okay? Right, I'm laying this out month by month. So when we get to February, March, April, should anything else be shifted or impacted towards us, the board is prepared for these decisions as you've directed the superintendent, and I will work with my staff to build the final budget. So when I was given this, when I started this trend of giving this information back in November, it was so that the board can make decisions if we were going to increase those class averages and, RIF staff or cut staff. At this point, I don't think we have to do that, but that's why you see it in November. And so it's a good worksheet to just give you an idea. It's also a good worksheet to the faculty so that they can see that the board's trying to maintain the goal of class sizes and supporting the certified staff. So.
Any other questions? Should we move on?
Cam?